Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
All right.
Rabbi.
Okay, there's another pastor. See?
Right. Rabbi rarely misses. Hey, Rabbi,
Rabbi,
how are you, sir?
I'm good. How are you?
All right. Well, it is 3:05, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. And as the tradition is in the Black community and African descent, we ask our eldest person in the room for permission to begin. And so I think right now that's Rabbi. Rabbi, can we have permission to begin?
You may begin.
All righty. And Dr. Miner, we also start off in prayer. Would you mind saying a quick prayer for us?
Yes, I will. Heavenly Father, we just thank you, Lord. You're the God of peace and justice, though you may be worshipped in different ways and called by different names, but we know that you are the one God that we all look to for strength and for guidance. And you're a God that inspires men and women to have concern and compassion and care for your creation, even those of us who are yet alive. Bless this program today. May we walk away greatly increased and inspired to do your will. This is our prayer for you, O God, and for us who serve him, the God of Jesus the Christ. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Amen. So I'm going to go ahead and get started, and thank you all who tuned in to The Solution. This is technically a family conversation, but due to COVID, we are forced to do it online, and I just didn't want to go another month without doing one. The purpose of The Solution has always been to stimulate conversation and to hold a think tank, if you will, of people who actually do and not just talk. And so when the late, great John Lewis would say, get into good trouble, that's always our intent, is to get into some good trouble. Amen.
Amen.
All right, so our topic this month is, do people of color really benefit from local political party loyalty? I'm Jerry Primm. I'm your moderator. I'm going to go through our rules of engagement. Let's see what I do. All right. Rules of engagement. First of all, this is a family meeting, meaning that it's typically people of color inside this meeting. When we have our community conversation, that's when we go out and everybody can participate. But because of COVID, we have to do what we have to do. Conflicting ideals are okay, and in fact, they're encouraged. If we don't have conflicting ideals, then we can never get to the best ideal. And so we encourage you to have conflicting ideals. There's a time limit on talking. We don't have any big eyes, no little U's. I don't have a grandiose presentation outside of this PowerPoint. This conversation almost never goes the way I think it is going to go. So we allow the spirit of the room to move it. But there is a time limit, and I'm usually the one who violates it. So pray for me.
They lay hands on you suddenly.
Yes, sir. So we're here to encourage each other. Even in our conflicting ideals, we want to be encouraging. Forgiveness is the rule. At the end of the day, if Big Rob took my ho-hos in 8th grade, I'm not to hold, while we're in here, I'm not to hold that against them. I got to learn to forgive, because if we can't forgive and sit down and have a conversation, we can't get to any kind of solutions. Pooling our resources to get a solution, that's always our objective inside the solution. I think that's self-explanatory. The mindset that you have to participate is, I want to help Black people, period. Even the people who are not people of color who come and participate, if you don't have that mindset, they know up front when they participate. If you don't have that mindset, this is not the place for you. I'm open to learn. You have to be open to learn. If you just think you know it all, then we're going to miss so much. Additional mindset. I can put aside my feelings for the greater good, period, point blank, end of story. That's what we believe inside the solution. And getting paid is not my primary objective. If this is where you think you're going to come and just network to get a contract or something, this is not that type of party. And I'm open for change / correction. My mentor is on here, and there's many a night, many a day that he'll call me and say, hey, you know, Jerry, you got this wrong. And I have to be open for that correction. And I believe that's what makes me pretty good at the things that I do. Mindset. I will not allow anyone to divide and conquer us, period. We always talk about power structure. Every single time we've done a solution, we have to define what power structure is. It's a group of persons having control of an organization. And then we talk about, or the establishment. Then the other definition is a hierarchical interrelationships existing within a controlling group, like a political party. So we always want to be inside of that. We always want to have that at the forefront of our mind. So because our objective is to do better for our people, and we have to know what we're dealing with. If you don't deal with the power structures or even acknowledge that they exist, there's no way in the world that you can work towards leveraging them to help your people. All right, I'm starting it off this way. This is going to be a little spicy, the way I'm going to start off today, because our question is do people of color really benefit from party loyalty? This is 137 shots. This is a photograph of the vehicle that Timothy and Melissa were in. This is a photograph of the judge who acquitted the individual who murdered those two. He's a Democrat. This is a picture of the prosecutor who acquitted the individual who in less than 2 seconds jumped out of a car and murdered Tamir Rice. He's also a Democrat. This is a photograph of the judge who ordered all of those officers to duct tape a Black man's mouth inside of Cuyahoga County. This is a news article where the county executive was going to plead the fifth if called to testify against the jail director. So when you plead without an immunity deal, so when you plead the fifth, that means that you have to have something that may be incriminating against you. Additionally, the impetus for me putting this on here is we had 8 dead people because of the policies of that administration. These are Democrats. This, because we don't have the, I can't give you the search core information for it right this second, but this in red is what the spend is from, now the county has a spend with their vendors of $400 million every single year. $400 million in 2020, 21, 22, and 23. That's what their spend is. What's in red represents what they spend with their white vendors. What's in blue is what they spend with Black vendors. So as we look at it, Black people represent 30% of this county. Their spend is less than 1% with all minorities. This is not an equitable distribution of wealth. The administration has been Democratic since I have been on earth. Now, this doesn't, I set this up because we're in a Democratic county. I'm not picking on, and I'm not anti-Democrat. Make no mistake about it. I'm not anti-Republican. I'm not anti-independent. I just want to bring an illustration to the question, do Black people really benefit from local political party loyalty? So when I look at an illustration like this, and I see that less than 1% goes to people of color when we actually pay taxes, and you can't even say it's like property taxes or income tax, because every time my children buy a can of pop, they pay 8 cents to the county. And so they're taxpayers for the county. but we receive less than 1%. That's an inequitable distribution of wealth. And I'm gonna finish off this first part with, I feel like as a people, the parties, both R and D, but in this county, I'm dealing primarily with D, say, why should they buy the cow when, why should they buy the milk when they can get the cow for free? So now we go into the question. Do people of color really benefit from local political party loyalty? And so, does anybody want to talk about that?
Well, I'll start first.
So, go ahead, Bishop.
Okay. I'm glad that you distinguish between local party affiliation and national party affiliation, because they two different things, right? And so on a national party affiliation, that's kind of more attached to broader public policy issues. You know what I mean? And so
Yes, sir.
I think those choices from a national standpoint have a lot to do with, you know, policies and principles. But I think on the local level, I think the answer is not so much in them, right? But I think the answer is more so in us, right? That we get what we fight for and we get what we demand, right? And that that graphic that you share is very, very telling, right? Very, very telling, right? And so I think it should really speak to, you know, how we play the game and how we make certain demands and certain asks, you know. And so I think I think that's a very shocking, telling stat. I just wanted to start off with that.
Absolutely. That's why, that's why I wanted it on there, so we can see what's real, not what somebody thinks about, but that's what's real. Yes, sir. So for me, when I heard that stat initially, it hit me because I'm sitting here saying that the vast majority of the challenges that I have been economic. And when I don't even get an economic opportunity, then there is, I'm like, you set the game up against me. I'm like,
Mr. Primm, I thought we had a young lady that was getting ready to speak. I'd like to hear from her.
Who was that? Was there somebody who wanted to speak?
When Bishop came on, there was a lady standing there. I thought she was ready to speak.
That was Lady Golston. She was signing in.
Okay, that's the boss.
Right, the big boss.
Let me just say one thing, and I'm ready to engage in a family conversation anytime. Bishop Monty is right. What he said was basically, we're not going to get any more than we demand and we get. What the key to that is unification and what we're asking for. And in my little bitty role that I was fortunate enough to have around Cleveland, we have not got to the point where we know what we're asking for and unify around that. Most of the kinds of times that we've had success is when we come together like this, flesh out our ideas and have an agreement before we walk out the door and say, this is how we're gonna go. So if anybody got an example of the last 5, 6, 7, 10 years of how we've done that and be successful around that number you just showed me from the county, please help me out. But it just bothers me that Bishop Monty she's correct. It's very difficult to demand something when you got 4 or 5 different entities demanding something that don't even relate to what we discussed after we leave this meeting. So my question becomes unification, demand, and nobody likes to hear the word boycott for economical reasons. Get down to the nitty-gritty. But once again, until we demand it from any local leaders, black, blue, green, or purple, any entities that has money, and Mr. Primm, you and I talk about this all the time. We are so divided within the framework of ourselves that we got to put our finger on what we're asking. And I believe that we'll probably be 70% successful if we're willing to sacrifice after we made the commitment. That's where I am right now.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Does anybody else want to make a comment related relative to that?
I would co-sign what Dr. Minor and Brother Harrison is saying, because we first of all, we don't have a black agenda that we can come together on and demand certain things, and then we again have to be together, because you'll have splinter groups. I'll give you an example. There was an agency that had an opportunity to get about $150,000 from TOPS when they were here, and they were set to get the money. The vice president went to corporate to pick up the check, and the people at corporate said, well, that's all right. We don't need to do that, because other members of that community came and asked for money for coffee and donuts for their meeting.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah. When I sit back and I think about it, if you don't have leverage, or people don't believe that you have leverage, then they have zero reason to do anything that you ask them to do, or that you demand them to do. So I often see somebody write a resolution, and we demand this, and we demand that, and we demand this. But then my question to them is, and I've asked it to leaders directly, all right, so you demand this, and if they say no, what's your or else? What is your or else? You demand this, or else I'm going to what? So one of the reasons why, and this was one of the things that just burned in me, and while we're having this discussion, when 137 shots happened in 2014, I believe, it's hurtful when you constantly see Black people who are being murdered. And so that judge tried to leverage that case around the tough on crime and pro-blue, etc. And I'm not anti-blue by no stretch of the imagination. But when he tried to leverage that to become the Supreme Court justice, we had to create an or else. In 2016, he ran for Supreme Court justice, and we leveraged our influence as a community, as the Black community, in order to block him from becoming the Supreme Court justice. And then he ran again in 2020. And in 2016, when I took the other campaign against him, I had people calling me like, that's my friend, and he's a Democrat, and don't go against him. And then in 2020, it really got intense. I got all kind of phone calls saying, Jerry, don't go against him because he's a Democrat, and this law and that law and whoever. And I'm just sitting up here like, and I had to ask the people, we're talking about elected officials who picked up the phone to call me and have this conversation, because I ran the minority side of the opposing campaign statewide. And I had to ask them, do you want me to go and have that conversation with the parents of those two people who were murdered and shot 137 times because he's a Democrat? Are you kidding me? Do you want me to go and have that conversation? And I'm just like, no, we're going to hold him accountable. That's our leverage. If Why buy the milk when you can get the cow for free? If we don't hold them accountable, then why should they do any different?
Mhm. I think the thing about it is that who's supporting those particular candidates as far as African Americans. You got to look at who's supporting those candidates and, you know, those elected officials that actually called you, you know, who support, what is their agenda as far as why do they support this person, especially when he let that go with the 137 shots. You
Their
know,
answer, go ahead, I'm sorry.
the thing about it is that, you know, we not only need to hold that person accountable, but those people who supported it, especially African Americans, accountable for why you support this particular person when he pretty much let the cops go that did this murder, because that's what it was. It was a murder. It wasn't no police stop or anything else like that. You know, you don't shoot up a car 137 times. You know, that's ridiculous.
Yeah. And I asked the question, and the primary answer I got is because he was a Democrat, period.
That's
And
stupid.
so I would ask them,
Sorry.
like, you're Black before you Democrat. I walk down the street. You can't tell what my party affiliation is by looking at me, but you can absolutely tell what my ethnicity is, or you have a clue by looking at me as I'm walking down the street. There is no way in the world I'm I personally, Jerry Primm, will ever put any party affiliation over what's in the best interest of the community that I come to.
Jerry,
Additionally, sir.
I'm listening to your example, and you're 1000% right. But you got a lot of I in your what you just said. I thought this conversation was about we.
It is about waste. So,
well, let me wait a minute now. Wait a minute. And that's our problem. Rabbi just said, what is the Black agenda? Watch this. And I shared this with you some time ago, so I don't mind sharing it with family. I was invited to a luncheon, which I hate to go to. Anybody knows me. When I'm invited to something like that, somebody wants something from me, and I don't want to give it, okay? I was with a rabbi. We talked about how to have an exchange with Black kids going to Jerusalem and Jewish kids coming into Cleveland. They were going to pay for it all, but they're right in the middle of it. The rabbi said to me, Mr. Harrison, can you define for me Black leadership in Cleveland? We know who we go to get things done. And he named some people that all of you know. And when he asked me the question, it went right to what Rabbi just said. Where's the Black agenda? I mean, who are we? I didn't say you, I said we. Because you just talked about what you had to do by yourself, not just by yourself, but you had other people around you. But the fact of the matter is, if that's part of the Black agenda, then we all should buy into it and get it done without having one person's head chopped off at the same time. That's how we are going to deal with responsibility versus accountability. And sometimes the word sacrifice is not in our vocabulary. So I'm not degrading what you're saying, because I know I work right side of you. I knew what you were doing, and I agree with everything. But we cannot continue to take on situations individually with 4 or 5 people, because we got so many situations. Last but not least, and I mean last, I'm going to talk too much. I looked at, listened to and saw Chantel's town hall. I also looked at Andrea Nelson's inauguration. And the more I looked at it and put the stuff together, the more I realized that, thank you, Mr. Goldstein, for getting Rabbi, for getting your wife there on time, because she did a good job. So I ain't gonna talk about what I saw there, okay? But when I went to the town hall, the kind of questions we were getting as a federal institution was, I got mold in my house and I've been trying to work with the city and I can't get the mold out. We have directed our people incorrectly. They think you got to go to a elected congressperson to get the mold out of your house, because somewhere along the line, the people that we elected and responsible for getting the mold out of our house have not taken on our responsibility. Should that be one of the Black agendas? Should we hold people that we just elected locally to it? Or should we continue to go along with all these emails that come across my desk? Save Sherwin-Williams, do this, do that, do that. Now, this is going to get me killed. Bishop Minor, you know I love you to death. Rabbi, I know you love. Why do we have 5 different ministerial alliances? Can we not pull that together on 5 Black agendas and take over and hold people accountable? That's just an example. I just realized some time ago, you can't do it by yourself because it's not lasting. Because once you're out of the picture, it dies. It dies. The whole momentum dies. Once seasoned people, and like I told you, Jerry, don't talk to me about the old guard, because at your age, you are the old guard, okay? Hey, Rabbi, how you like that? Okay.
Yeah.
And so I get tired of people talking about people that got beard like me and you, Rabbi. We the old guard. No, these people that's talking, they are the old guard now. They have to reach down to young people. But my whole point is, we can make some things happen as long as we know which way we're going and we stay true to it, because it's been proven that we can do it. All right.
Yes, sir. Mr. Harrison, I want to interject there. At some point in time, somebody has to start. And if we're waiting on 1,000 people to jump in, it's never going to happen. But somebody has to start and start that snowball rolling down the hill till it becomes a great big old snowball. So when my purpose for having this conversation is not to say, look at what I've done, is really look what we've done, because at the end of the day, one, I don't hardly do anything without having a conversation with you, and Rabbi, and Bishop Minor, and Kareem, and a whole bunch of other people that I'm not going to take the time to mention here. The thing that I'm looking at is that inside of this county and inside of many counties, we don't know what to ask for, and we don't know how to hold people accountable because we don't even know what to ask for.
That's correct.
So when right now we have a unique situation where every time an elected official comes by, like, we don't know what. I can remember when we first started GPAC and we did our first endorsement process. We had a set of questions for every judge, and the questions were really only applicable to municipal and county general division. But there's a whole nother set of questions that you ask that have nothing to do with that you would ask the Court of Domestic Relations or the 8th District County 8th District Court of Appeals or the Supreme Court. Those are totally different questions. But at the time, we didn't know what questions to ask. So we didn't know at that point in time how to hold them accountable. 2 years later, we have a pretty good grasp on that, and that served as the impetus of how we ask questions now. We sit down, and right at the end of this month, we have a retreat where we sit down and think about stuff to ask for. Like, we just left this mayoral election, and we asked for resources for our community. As we go and look at what's coming down from the gubernatorial, we'll ask for resources for our communities that look like us. So I agree with you, Mr. Harrison. We, as a community, we don't always know what to ask for, and we are fragmented. But at some point in time, to me, we have to just start someplace.
Well, let's start with the $500 million that the city of Cleveland has that came in the month of March and has not been spent yet in our community.
Mm-hmm.
Go on,
Right.
smack my face. Go tell me, Jared. And I'm not putting you on the spot.
Mm-hmm.
I hope I'm not, because I have no intention of doing that. Because you're exactly correct. We don't know what to ask for. But we should be telling people that there's $500 million that came in March, and that there are proposals there that affect the community in a very positive way. And we have not, as of today, and I want somebody to tell me that I'm wrong, spent one dime on our community out of that $500 million. We could go to Lee Harvard. We could go to established institutions and set goals and objectives. Bishop Minor, you know how to do that. You've been doing it all your life. And have some of that money to improve the quality of life of our people. You want to take that one on? Or are we to the point where we know who the people are and we don't want to rock the boat?
Yep.
I'm just asking, because I mean, everybody think that I'm talking like this because I'm retired. I hate to tell you, I was born talking like this, okay? And so don't think that I'm just shoving it off on somebody, because I'm not. But it really, really, and Jerry knows, it really, really gets to me when people are asking, can we get money that comes into the community? And we got money that's in the community and we're trying to figure out yet how to spend it.
Right.
I hope I'm not stepping on anybody's toes, but if it says, if I am, just say ouch.
Ouch.
Brother Harrison, I think you're right on point. Everybody's right on point. However, it's my contention that the Black family of this county, this city, at some point must come together and decide what that agenda is. And when we leave that room, be 100% that this is what we're asking. And then if we don't, when we come into that room, have the ask and have the consequences if it's not met. I feel that's what's missing.
Sure.
And until we do that, I think we're whistling in the wind.
Absolutely.
I'm sorry, excuse me.
Yeah, I was gonna add that I think going back to the unity and being organized, what I'm hearing is, really being organized. And I think the starting point, and it doesn't have to be a big room, right? It doesn't really have to be a big room. You can take 5 or 6 major organizations in town, NAACP, pastors, sometimes outside of elected officials also, and to establish a covenant process, right? So if we say, let's covenant around 3 issues that's important for us and we're never going to compromise them, right? Just like we saw something in the election, in the congressional election, where one community rallied around one self-interest issue that was important to that community. And people that never worked, that hadn't been working together, people that were arguing in their culture, right? They all came together because one of the core principles that they all believed in potentially being compromised, right? And so if we have that kind of covenant agreement, right, we should all agree, everybody's not going to support the same candidate. We should all agree that all of us may look at things differently. We shouldn't be so traumatized, right, in our politics that we fight among each other because of who we support, right? We don't have, but if we have 3 principles, right? If it's education, if it's business development, and whatever it is. So it is because of my covenant to the agenda, right? We call it the agenda, right? It doesn't matter about who's running or any of this. I am holding true to the agenda. And so I think that when we start out that way, there was some, let me say this too, and it's probably on, this is there may be a wider audience here, but let me just add something. Let me just add something very briefly, right? About over the last 15 to 20 years, when there was a time when I was a young activist in the city, came back home, and among the young activists, we didn't want a godfather or a godmother, right? And I want you to hear this, Brother John. We've had these conversations, I think, over the years, right? We didn't want one person to call us in the room. Like, I've always been a loose cannon. I've always been, Tony Minor, okay? But back then, we kind of fought against that Lou Stokes or that Carl Stokes or that George Forrest being able to call everybody in the room and saying, we're not going to leave here until we're all on the same page. So we fought against that. So what did we end up? We end up with everybody doing their own thing, right? And we thought some kind of organized principle was going to put us together, but there has to be a mechanism. And I'm not necessarily, and we can argue what is the best process. Cleveland is not Chicago because Chicago has 4 Clevelands. Black people in Chicago don't fight against each other the way they do in Cleveland. We only have 1 Cleveland. But you can be in Chicago, people in the north side really don't even know who all the churches are on the south side because it's so big. Cleveland is a town. But I think we have to find a process where if it's one person that we all trust and love, right? And that can, if it's the clergy who we trust and are not going to get caught up in politics, whatever it is, but there has to be some process that's going to get us in the room. We leave our egos at the door. We leave our own perspectives at the door, and we come together, not around partisanship, but we come together around principles. That's what Malcolm said. That's what Martin said. All of our Black folk are not as partisan as they think. We're principled, and we need to adhere to that.
Well, I appreciate what you're saying. Thank you.
Same here, Tony. However, I do have a problem with 4 or 5 people coming in the room. I think the room needs to be big.
Oh yeah, no, I'm not saying 4 or 5. Yeah, I get you. I
think the room needs to be big, and you get a cross section. Maybe you have to use the nominal method or something to get a cross section for an agenda, and then prioritize whatever you're going to do on the agenda. Everything on the agenda will get done, but you have priorities, and we leave the room in agreement.
Okay. Well, I think that there's more organizations that need to be in the room as well. Black Lives Matter, with the pastors, and there's a couple of different pastor organizations that I think they should come together to be on one accord, because you have too many spread out with different agendas for African Americans or somehow their own agendas. But I do think that other organizations, along with those community organizations and activist organizations, should also be in that room as well. Like I said, Black Lives Matter, Cleveland should be in that room as well, and others should be in that room. And it should be bigger than that. I do agree with the gentleman that said, it should be bigger than that, but we must come on one accord to see what we want. And there should be the top 5 principles. That's how to spend that $500 million and spread it across each community so that each community can benefit from it, especially the East Side communities where the majority of African Americans reside at, from, like people was, talking about still getting the streets fixed. And it shouldn't still, after all these years, there should not be a problem with any potholes in the streets or any other things or more protection for, or any more job opportunities and things of that nature. So I think there should be more organizations in the room, but we must come together on one accord.
I'm not saying who should be in the room. I'm just saying the room should be inclusive.
Yes, it should be.
Okay.
It should be.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the rooms definitely should be inclusive. And I don't think that it
family
should.
members only. A family
Yes.
members. Okay.
Hence the reason why, if you notice, we meet as a family once a month with the solution.
Jerry,
sorry.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Who should call the meeting?
Hey, we convene one with the solution every single month.
No, I'm not talking that meeting. Everything that's just been said, I'm in complete agreement with. And I love what Bishop Minor was saying, because people did fight. And I share with you, and I'm probably the second oldest person in the room, and I share with you, how did we come together as Black people when the Democratic Party was not doing us right, and we succeeded from them and started the 21st District Caucus?
Right. Right.
We have
Yes.
models, people.
Yes. Yes.
Come on, Bishop Minor.
We got them.
Yes.
We got them. We got them.
Well,
We got them.
Who's the man? Who's the woman?
Yeah.
I was so mad. Let me tell you something.
Right.
We are missing out on so much. I'm not condemning anybody. And I called Jerry yesterday, so you'll know. I have never realized how many Black women we got as municipal judges. We have a justice pool of brilliant Black women that we don't know how to use according to the rules and regulations. Dynamite people. And I'm just saying, who among us can call people into the room? First of all, when we did the 21st District Caucus, that was a bold move, because we were like Texas trying to get out the Union, okay? And it worked. And some of you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah, man.
Because you participated in it, and it was hard. And you still got your resources. You still had to have every elected official had to come through there. Black, white, blue, green, Republican, whatever. Maybe that's old school, but it is a model. So we just have to ask ourselves the question, how do we use the past to improve upon the future?
Well, John, it's a model that Georgia is using the 21st District Caucus model to be successful today. So
that's correct. That's correct.
So let me ask you this.
I read Stacey Abrams' book. You're exactly correct. I thought I was in Cleveland.
Right. And you know, it was a place. I remember I was about 27 years old when I came back to Cleveland. I was president of SCLC. And it was a place, the Mother Chapman, you come, you didn't know her. She always gave you 2 minutes. Now, if you messed up on your 2 minutes, she wouldn't give you 2 minutes next week. But it was a place where all philosophies cross paths. It was there that Omar Ali and Khalid, all the street activists. That's when we were doing a lot of street activism. But it was a place of a multi-purpose thought. And I remember that Congressman Stokes, he would come. Now, Congressman Stokes would come, and I remember he would come and have his cap on that said war. There was a time, there was the platform for us to announce power strategies, and we were all working together. Was it perfect? No, but it was a place every Monday night. I mean, it Vales, man. Every Monday night we would come together, and you would hear information, share information, and be fed, and people were valued, regardless of personal point of view. You know, you could be radical as Khalid Muhammad, or you could be as moderate as NAACP, SCLC at that time. But we all came together all around, watch this, all around Black love. See, there's so much trauma in all of us, and I haven't seen the type of hate among Black people who are purportedly trying to fight for the same thing. I might not agree with my brother or my sister, but I shouldn't hate them and say hateful things about them. It starts with our supporting one another, loving one another, and valuing the different gifts that we bring in the journey.
I do agree with Reverend Minor about that. There's so much and our own hate will cause our own destruction. And how can we get agenda if we can't get along with one another about anything? That's the problem. That is the problem. I'm glad that, we're talking about this, because of the simple fact of the matter is, it's like being in the media. I see the destruction all the time. Activists don't agree with pastors. This organization doesn't agree with that organization. But how can we get a Black agenda to help our community? Because meanwhile, while we're fighting amongst ourselves, there's people still getting killed in our community by police. There's people still starving in our community. There's no opportunities in our community or better opportunities in our community as far as other communities. And we have to, no matter what organization or affiliation, whether it be, or pretty much, let's be honest, sexual orientation, we must come together to help our communities as far as the Black agenda. And it's tiresome. So now we have to put together a blueprint or a plan, whether it be the plan that has been set to improve that plan, or make a new plan to get it together.
Bishop Minor, you took me back, and I promised Jerry that I wasn't going to talk so much today. So this is my last.
You talk all you want to, sir.
You took me back to something, because the agenda to coming out of those honest meetings, where some people didn't like it, some people did like it, and we all came together. There wasn't a whole lot of hate, cussing and fussing and rooting and tooting. But I remember, and I think I shared this with Jerry some time ago, my job was to go down to the county office and tell Russo that he had 10 intern programs, 20 intern programs, and we wanted 10 of those for our Black kids coming from college. We got those 10. And then we said, we want people in every governmental office. We got people, jobs in every governmental office. And some of you guys know exactly who those people were. We took over the Board of Elections and made sure that the Democrats had some same focus. We had objectives, we had goals, and we had people that we had to fight with each other. And I was one of them, young, didn't know what I was talking about, and got slapped more than once, okay? But I learned from getting slapped. That's why Jerry and I get along so well, because every now and then I have to hit him, and he hits me back. That's what I love about it. But the fact of the matter is, what Bishop Minor did is took me back, because there wasn't just a whole lot of B word, because I don't like that word, just a lot of mess. It was an agenda, and everybody had a responsibility. I didn't know what I was going to do when I went down to the auditor's office and had to tell Jimmy the Moore's best friend, who he's in jail with now, that you're going to give me 10 slots. And I walked out with 10 slots. So somewhere along the line, Jerry said, we have some leverage that we got to do. Just that simple. And the leverage is Black wealth and Black vote. All right? I quit.
That's interesting, Rabbi. One thing that I think about, and maybe this is a next step, and you'll see at the end of this, I'll put in a link and I'll put it on Facebook for people to participate via Zoom in that conversation, where it's a planning session. But maybe I've seen a number of different Black agendas. I've seen Dr. Claude Anderson, I've seen Boyce Watkins, I've seen the one that Ice Cube put out. There are a number of different ones. Maybe we ought to take some time and go through those. And then, because right now I'm dealing with local conversations. Maybe we ought to take some time and go through those and say, and take, eat the meat and spit out the bones, and have conversations or have a session where we're planning on what agenda we want to go forward with. One of the questions that I have for Mr. Harrison and Rabbi and Dr. Minor is, when you had the 21st Congressional District Caucus, who was the one who called it? And just so we can see historically how that happened. And while you were there, like some of the things that I've experienced is and I'm a member of clergy. Sometimes I'm sitting in clergy meetings. Clergy thinks that only clergy should be leadership and at the table. Whereas I'm of the opinion that we're not a monolithic organ, or not a monolithic group, and we should have BLM at the table, and we should have Khalid Smad at the table, and we should have others at the table. So how did you all manage that back then? Was it who called it, and how did you manage being inclusive, more inclusive? Well, who was at the table at the 21st Congressional District Caucus?
The manager for the day-to-day activities had the backing of both Stokes brothers, had the backing of George Forbes, had the backing of Arnold Pinckney, and had the backing of a lot of Black elected Democrats, which means if she called a meeting, they set the agenda and she was inclusive of everybody. Bishop Minor just told you. She'll give you 2 minutes, and if you didn't do what you're supposed to do on that 2 minutes to state your case, the next time you didn't get 2 minutes. So you had to come in with an agenda, okay? Nobody was excluded. Believe it or not, at one time, Felicity was part of the Congressional Black Caucus. Now, you know we had to be open to be able to do that, okay? And incidentally, he's my my councilman, so I get along very well with him. But the fact of the matter was, the cream rises to the top. Just that simple. And so you got to figure out who has the cream, no matter what the issues are, because it's going to rise to the top. And those are the people that people talk about, the old guard, but they were bold enough to set an agenda. But what always happens is if you don't have the day-to-day operation for that kind of agenda, you lose. Right. Because nobody wants to take it on. Let me give you an example, Jerry. That's what happened to Betco. It no longer exists because nobody picked it up and gave the day-to-day activities for it. I rest my case, Rabbi.
That's absolutely right. And once again, Jerry, the 21st District Caucus didn't meet once a month. You know, they met at least once a week, and then there were committee meetings in between, so that we kept the fire. If you don't feed a fire with logs, it's going to burn out.
Right.
Right. And so we kept the fires going. We met every week, and and everybody, anybody who looked like us had a voice. Hello, you called, yes, and you got put on the agenda, and you were given X amount of minutes, all right, to state your agenda. And we respected one another. We listened to. We didn't necessarily agree with one another, all right. And let me say something to something I just heard in terms of in a group of ministers where there's ministers. I don't think a layman is going to come in. Tony Minor, you are an alpha, all right, and I'm an omega, right? When you have your meeting, are you going to let Omega come in and run your meeting?
No.
Oh, okay, so that's,
yeah, but he'll let a Kappa because I'm a Kappa.
Yeah, well, okay. Well, John, same thing with you. The Kappa's not going to let the alphas come in and run their meeting, all right?
Not at all.
And so there's certain things, people, where your kind is going to have to operate and exist. But it does not mean that we cannot reach outside of ourselves, all right, and be inclusive in our conversations, all right, and in our developing an agenda. I tried this, I think it was about 20 years ago. I called for a Black agenda, all right. We met upstairs in Lancers. George Dixon let us have a meeting upstairs, and we developed a Black agenda. Before I could drive from Lancers, all right, to the Harvard Community Service Center, it was out. And an elected official and a former elected official who were the leaders of the community met me at the door and told me I would not be involved in developing a Black agenda for the Black community. And what would happen to me and my wife if I insisted. 5 years later, they came to me and apologized. We did not understand what you were trying to do and we agree with you. We do need a Black agenda. Can we do this again? And we've been kind of stumbling through it ever since. We don't need necessarily a new organization. I spoke with the new mayor in terms of the police commission. And I shared with him, we don't need a new police commission. We have one that's been working for 5 or 6 years. People who know the process and the work. Why don't we empower them, all right, and also give them a budget, all right? So what happened, John, all right, the 21st District Caucus, all right, had some money coming, some money was made available to budget, to have an office, to have a phone, to have computers, all right, have someone on duty 7 days, 6 days a week, 5 days a week, whatever it was, all right, to manage the business of the caucus.
That's right.
All right. And we cannot keep sitting around having these conversations and don't put a budget up, all right, and empower people to do some things. So we must develop an agenda, empower the agenda and those who we choose to carry it out, and then create a budget.
Hey,
You heard about it. That was even money that came in that helped us have a website and be incorporated. Wait a minute, be incorporated at the state level.
Yes.
Am I right?
Yes.
We were incorporated. We were a legitimate organization that anybody could recognize was legitimate. Office space and all.
Hey, Jerry.
Sir.
Oh, hey, Jerry, I wanted to add one thing, and then I wanted to kind of encourage to hear from a few of the other brothers. You know, one of the dangers of looking back,
all right.
One of the dangers of looking back, when you look at 21st Congressional Caucus, there were a lot of dynamics and a lot of variables that made that work for them, right? I think we can borrow from the spirit of it, but it might not necessarily be that. Because one of the things that we had at that time was that we had an Anna Chapman, a Mother Chapman, and everybody viewed, sometimes she could be nice as a rose, and other times she could be hard as I don't know what, but everyone respected her. There was a lot of other dynamics. Like I said, I was 27, 28, came back to Cleveland. I grew up in Glenville during the Glenville riots. I had a different kind of appreciation for the elected officials than I think people have now, right? It was just a totally different times. But I think we can borrow from those movements. But I also want to hear from Brother Kareem and hear from Brother Andrew as to what they're hearing and what input they can have, because I learned a lot from Rabbi and from John Harrison over the years, but I also learned from our younger brothers, and they're not that much younger than us, but they are experienced and seasoned as well. So let's for me, I want to just kind of take the cotton out my ears and put it in my mouth, and I want to kind of hear from them also.
And some of the sisters are on too.
And some of the sisters too, right? Amen.
I appreciate that. I can go ahead and kind of give my perspective. One, it's been great to hear about the 21st caucus and the work that you all did. I think that it definitely makes sense that we need some way to come together, have different groups at the table. Jerry always says you don't have to be uniform to be unified, but to have a unified message of what's important for the community, I think is huge. I think a challenge that we'll run into, especially with folks my generation, I'm 27, there is, I believe, like a distrust in institutions. And so folks feel like it's hard to get to the same accord because people they want to be right versus the right solution happen. So they want to be the one to stop the problem. If they can't be the one to solve the problem, they don't want the problem solved. And I think I see that a lot. So I think that leads to some distrust of institutions. But I do agree that having a mechanism to bring people together to come up with some shared priorities and use that to keep elected officials and other folks in the community accountable is huge.
I agree with you, brother. I agree with you, Andrew. Andrew, right?
Correct.
Right. I agree with you about the distrust because I hear about it a lot.
So if I could say this, one of the things that I've learned is that I've learned to be both a team player, help with things in the background. And I've also learned how to be someone someone with a steady head, steady mind, just kind of taking control of the helm. And so with that being said, I believe, I just agree with so much that I've heard here thus far. But I would say that, yes, we need to establish some type of infrastructure, you know what I mean? Like having an office and I get that. I'm learning through experience just how necessary that is. But I also think that we can't waste a single minute. I've watched just, with things getting started, us getting things started, like even with GPAC, just how some things can just take a very long time. And I don't want, and we take a long time when we start setting stuff up, having meetings after meetings after meetings. And so with that said, we cannot spend so much time on that, though it's important, or maybe we just delegate that to some folks. But while that's going on, folks have to be just dealing with the issues at hand. I just if we're going to have something, we've got to really start. It's like emergency situation. Time is wasting. When I listen to ideas of where we should get started, what should we invest in the communities? I mean, I've got ideas, about that. And what everything everybody says has in common is this right here. Like, it starts with whatever you recommended. It starts with our kids. So if you talk about those people that might be problematic in our neighborhoods, they were kids once. Those people, as long as we have a failed school system, that are going to go through that factory we call a school that's churning out this bad product, that right there, that's our future problem. So if we're going to start anywhere, like investing in our communities, we start there. And there's more we could do, because when we start with the kids, just overhauling and making them get the proper funding in our schools, but also making them do it right. When we got to get to that point, then all we got to do is we're arming our kids, we're equipping our kids with the tools that they need to be, to make it out in society, to be productive. But we also find a symbiotic way in which we can put them to work. Like, we help them get certain skills. We ask businesses to do like mentoring and so forth. We can bring them together. Those are the ones you give like abatements to and stuff like that. Because they're teaching our kids, they're winding up employing our kids and stuff like that. But I just think that we've got to figure out ways in which it always starts with the kids. Because if we get them right and keep them right, you know what I mean? It's sky's the limit. We'll be able to fix a lot of things because this is out there. And I just don't want to keep rolling on, but I just think that we've got to just have a dual approach. People just deal with the infrastructure stuff. Other people that have these plans, once we have that recognized collective power, like we got to take off running and make those changes and start with them kids, and we can work in all that other stuff, you know, through education and opportunities and the way we could put them to work in our neighborhoods. And with that, I yield my time. Sorry about that, everybody.
Right. Oh, that's why I like you. That's why I love you, Kareem. Period. You know, you're right, and all of us are fathers and grandfathers and mothers on this line. Hopefully, I'm not being too, you know, saying anything out of turn, but most of us are, you know, especially African American fathers and grandfathers, and we've seen that when you build up the younger people, then you don't have the problems that you have, and sometimes, you know, when we neglect them, then they don't feel like they have a voice either. So we have to build them up as well, so they can have that, you know. And during a time where the pandemic and the variants are multiplying like wildfire, so that's very important. Thank you, Kareem. Just want to say thank you.
I think,
Rain, I think you hit the nail on the head. I'm an educator for 30-some years. And if you don't, then we all know that if you can't read, write, compute, and think in the abstract, you don't stand a chance. And so what you just said may be something that we all pay attention to, for the simple reason that the technology, and Jerry and I talk about this all the time, we're not prepared right now, this minute, to take on technology jobs. And we are going to get lost in the weeds. And I love what you said. I just have to say it to you face to face, because if I didn't, I would tell you that. Because let me tell you something. We have an opportunity to change that thing around if we honestly believe that all children can learn. But we have people that are in power that honestly do not believe that people that look like us can learn. That's where I think this is a great conversation, Jerry, because we're talking about solutions. And should they be working with our kids or not? Don't talk about union or anything else. We have people that don't believe our children can learn. Last but not least, Jerry, don't smack me upside the head. I talked to Jerry last night. I said, people are raving about a 62% graduation rate. 65% graduation rate, right? You want your child to be the other 35%? No. Mine is not going to be the other 35%. But you've already decided that your victory at 65. You ought to be striving for 100. Okay? We get just as happy as we can be with 65. We, not just we satisfied for the 65. And I've been saying this ever since I've been in education. And if people don't like it, I don't care whether you like it or not, I don't want my child to be that 35. And the other thing is, we're the #1 city with poverty. With that education that you're talking about right now, we can get out of it. Thank you for what you said.
I hate to interject, but isn't 65 like a D minus?
Yes, everywhere in the world.
Yeah, so we operating pretty much, he's saying 65% graduation rate. So we're operating at a D minus right now.
Yeah.
That is not cool. I always strive for my son to make A's and B's. So 95 to 100%, always strive for. We just can't settle for that 65. I'm sorry, I can't do it. At like 65%, hate to be a bearer of bad news, but 65% is the reason why Baker Mayfield is behind on the bench right about now. That's 65%.
And the Browns just won without him.
Right. So, but the thing about it is, like, we have to increase not only that particular number, but we have to increase the expectations. And the thing about it is, what Kareem said, what you said, as far as an education, that just don't sit right with me at all. That 65% for our children graduation rate, no. So the other 30,
check me out, Pastor. Just check me out and find out if I'm right or not. But I've been fighting it for a long time.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you said what you said, because 65 is an F. Okay.
Yeah.
EF, yeah, pretty much. That's not cool. No.
And I wonder, I think Brother Newsom is a data guy, but I think when we look at the chart over 20 years, right, we can see how how bad the problem is. I wonder what it was like 3 years ago, 2 years ago, right? 5 years ago, 10 years ago. What's been the history of that? And I think beyond that, all this stuff is gradual. I think, we should also force them to do a study as to what happened to those 65%. What are they prepared for? Out of that 65% that graduate, how many of them went to school? And watch this. How many of the 65% went to college and stayed in college beyond the first year? So many people, you can demean any of the schools, but you can get all A's at one school and then go to college and be unprepared. So it's also the quality of that graduation. But I want to Jerry, just kind of go back to that first question, right? The question was local support, blind support of Democratic Party locally, and I certainly think it is far too much of that. I think when you look at principles and public policy, when you look at public policies on the federal level, there is no question as to why, from an African American perspective, depending upon what are your values, what are your values on how the government should act. So based on the progressive ideals that I embrace, I don't think we have any other choice. It's easy for me to vote for Democratic candidates. But on a local level, I think we need to do a far better job, and we need to be harsher on our support of local candidates who we support merely because they're Democrats. Let me end with this point. And Rabbi, no, it's true. Democratic judges, candidates come by United Pastors every year annually, right? And we support them. And not always, we support Republicans as well. But when I walk the streets, Brother Kareem, and Brother Kareem can tell you that those same candidates those same judges who we parade year after year in our pulpits and across United Pastors, if you go in the streets and talk to brothers, the brothers in the
court,
the same candidates are the ones that are chopping their heads off, not willing to give them second chances, and not willing to invest in programs like drug court and second chance court. So I think locally we need to put the partisanship aside locally and really embrace the concept of principles.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Well, let me tell you something. I love this. Thank you for inviting me.
And Jerry, hear this. And Jerry did not give me talking points.
So I'm gonna throw, speaking of drug court, and it's very important. My mother, if some of y'all may know her, Anita France, works for community assessment and works for the drug courts and works with the drug courts. And she's run into some judges, even on a recommendation that this person should stay in treatment. And some of those judges who are Democrat, pretty much chop the heads off some of the men and some of the women. And the problem is that we got to realize which Democrats. Are we voting for the progressive Democrats that want change? Are we voting for the Democrats disguised as Republicans, or Democrats disguised in their own agenda? We got a lot of Democons, in the Democratic Party, period. It's like, they say that they one thing, but really they another. So we got to watch out for those who we push along in those pulpits. And those same people that are being pushed in those pulpits are some of the same ones that are trying to come on, my talk shows to talk about what their agendas are. And I'm not having it if they're not supporting African-American people. If their goal is to just lock everybody up, even though they're Democrats, I'm not having it this year. This is 2022. So if not, then if they're progressive as far as, making sure that citizens are safe, but making sure that those people who have made mistakes get some type of help, especially with drug addiction and other addictions, drug addictions, alcohol addictions, anything else, then that's the people who I want to push as far as that. I don't have no party affiliation. I just want the best person in the right seat, in the right job to help the people and to keep, balance the line, keeping the citizens safe, but also help the people that really, really need it.
I'm going to have to
agree.
sign off right
John,
quick, but
John, hold
you're
on.
exactly correct. I have to sign off right quick, but you're exactly correct. I had to be taught, because I'm old school. Jerry, I'm going to put you on the spot again. Data is already out there as to who those judges are. Data is already out there that says who the judges are that send people to the Justice Center because they cannot make bond. It's
Actually,
already
they hide the data, Mr. Harrison, but
I
we're
was
in the
going to say
process of
yes.
it.
Yes.
Yeah,
They hide the
John, before you go, let me say this. And to Larry's point, Larry, I need to know what you're talking about and who you're talking about. We fund the drug court and the mental health court. And if they're not cutting the mustard, I'm the chairman of the board of the Adams board that funds the drug court
okay.
Hey,
and the mental health.
Rabbi, here's what I'll share with you. I watched a time-lapse film of drug court. There were 23 defendants. Only one of them was Black, in a county that's 30% Black, with the vast majority of the people who come through Cuyahoga Common Pleas being, or any of the courts in the urban court being Black. So 23 defendants, only one of them was Black. I counted myself. So every last one of them needs to be audited as far as I'm concerned. The trick is that what they do is they hide the data because they don't want us to be able to prove it. One thing that I wanted to chime in about is, no, I'm going to let somebody else talk. Let me shut up.
Sorry, I didn't
We lost somebody.
All right. So,
And Jerry, on that point, you see, if it's United Pastors, Baptist Ministers Conference, whoever it may be, when these candidates come, you see, we need to be armed with the facts, right? We need to be armed with the questions. So we can ask that question. I will forever ask that question. How many African-American people have you referred to drug court? Those are the critical questions, as opposed, and I'm gonna say something harsh here, as opposed to our faith leaders cutting outside deals. Hello, somebody.
wow.
And then the endorsement is no more than a parade. And I get tired of being used. And I'm saying this publicly. I get tired of being used to support somebody else's agenda. And I'm not saying that happens with African-American preachers. I'm not saying that it happens often. It doesn't happen often. But there are times that it does happen. And I think that we need to be a database activist. We need to know the facts, because the facts don't lie. And I think it's the facts then that should guide our praxis. It should guide our practice of activism based on the facts. That's where we need to be. We can't, it can't be any other way. The facts are going to be the thing that drives us to make the decision on who we support and what direction we go.
Thank you,
Bishop. I want to jump in there. One of the things that we do at GPAC is, one of the questions that we ask every single candidate that ever comes before us is, do you agree to give us your past, access to your past, your current, and your future data? Because with access to your past, your current, and your future data, you've agreed to give it to us. Then we can get a benchmark of who you are as a person, as an individual, as the decisions that you make. And you can't hide behind the veil of the county said I can't do this, that, or the other. You have access to your own data if you're sitting on that bench, and you can give it to us. Now, everybody who's come before us has agreed to. And additionally, one of the things that I think that we could do collaboratively as all of our organizations, BLM, GPAC, all of the ministerial organizations, is share the questions that we ask and not be afraid to ask the tough questions. Because when we go down there before any of the courts, they ask us the tough questions. Now, when they come before us, we have to ask the tough questions. When we're sitting up there and we're looking at that one slide, that pie chart that I showed you, where we get less than 1% of the spend, they ask us tough questions when we're trying to get it. We need to ask you the tough questions as you're trying to get what you think you need from us. And so we need to share that information so that when they come before GPAC, they get this. When they come at the solution, they get that. When they come before UPM, East Cleveland Concerned Pastor, Mount Pleasant Ministerial Alliance, and so on and so forth. Black Women's PAC, our oldest and longest running Black PAC in the state. We all have shared information and we put them on a hot seat constantly.
That's what's up.
Well, I
They
think,
have
Jerry,
it.
you know, I know this is solutions. We go to a solution part, but beyond the solution part, what is our next step beyond the next step of solution in terms of calling the community together? Before, listen, gentlemen and ladies, let me recommend 2 books to you. One is Crisis in the Village by Dr. Robert Franklin, Tony, the president of Morehouse. The other is My Grandmother's Hand by Resmaa Menakem, RESMAAMENAKEM, that deals with much of the trauma that we're faced with, etc., and leads us towards some solutions.
So in the chat, I just put a link. If you click on that Google link, it should just take you to your browser, fill out your information. Everybody on this call actually have your information. Then I have a follow-up session scheduled for this Thursday at 6:00 p.m. Via Zoom. So I'll send you out the information for that. That will be a working session. But as in Rabbi, to your point, at 4:30, I was just going to go ahead and then shut down. We've talked about the conversation and then go through our normal, how we end the solution. I'll put that I'll put that on my Facebook as well. All righty, so I guess I can go ahead and, did anybody else want to comment on the challenges that we were dealing with as it relates to this? I think we've had some very interesting pointed conversation. Anybody else want to say anything else? All right.
I just wanted to say that I've been following the dialogue that's occurring through Facebook as well. And so it's been, it's had a very strong reach. A strong reach is not always defined by the number of people, but the quality of the people. And if you go on Facebook and look at the brothers the folks, not just only brothers, who have commented, we've had some solid participation. So I just wanted just to add that I think this was a very good discussion. And maybe when we have part 2, maybe some of them that were viewing on the Facebook side of it can also now go on the be part of the Zoom discussion, because I particularly like to hear comments by, Judge Michael, and Ken Dow was on, and that was Nelson, Judge Nelson, and there were a number of them. Brother Eric Johnson was viewing. So it's, this has had a really good reach, with some very diverse thought and always controversial. It's just a different side of viewing the coin,
I think that it's always good to have diverse thought. I don't care that Bishop Minor doesn't always pay for my lunch when we go out to have lunch, but I love him the same, and I love his diverse thought pattern. But at the end of the day,
I pay next time.
Right. But I think that without conflicting ideals and conflicting conversations, I don't want to agree with you, and I don't want to be the smartest person in the room, and I don't want to have the only answer. I love it. I've gotten calls from just about everybody on this call. I can't tell you some of the stuff that Rabbi has said to me because it's explicitives. And I can't tell you how many times I've had a conversation where Kareem has called me and said, Primm, I think you're off on this one. And Russ Neal, our councilman, do you want to say something, Russ, before we go into the solution portion? Are you there? Russ Neal? Well, Councilman Neal, he and I have interesting dialogue all the time, and I want to point him out as a dynamic individual who has stood up in his community and said, I'm not going to just accept the status quo, and he's gone against.
Russ is on.
Russ, did you want to say anything? Did you want to comment before we go into the solution?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, I've just been listening attentively. Look forward to the working session that's coming up.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And that working session will be this Thursday on Zoom. It will not be on Facebook, and it'll be us in a conversation working towards solutions. So for the last part of the solution, Andrew, can you put it up on the screen? The last part of the solution, every time we have a solution, is we can talk for an hour, hour and a half about whatever the challenges are. But the last part, we only want to talk about possible solutions. And so right here, you have a time limit of 2 minutes. I have the timer. And we want to talk about solutions to the challenge of how do we hold officials, and I'm not going to just say elected officials, how do we hold officials accountable to people of color, regardless of party affiliation?
Would that be officials and community leaders?
Yeah, yes, sir. Answer your question, yes, sir. So
the thing that everybody kind of pretty much said today was the knowledge piece, being equipped with the knowledge to hold everyone accountable.
So knowing what questions to ask, is that what you're saying, Robert?
Absolutely. You can ask any question, but it's the wrong question. You're not going to get the wrong results. And in order to get the right result, we got to ask the right question and be equipped enough to know what questions we need to ask them, what things we need to hold them accountable for, and what we're looking at. Like we spoke about earlier, I got 2 minutes, but we spoke about earlier about the $500 million. If we don't know how we can spend it, where it's going to be spent, how it's going to be moved, and we don't hold our elected officials and ourselves accountable for moving that money, and we're not knowledgeable about it, then how is it going to get moved? So we got to be able to know how to ask the right questions to get things done.
Awesome. Anybody else want to jump in?
Well, Jerry, one of the things I think we have developed are what are the consequences?
What are the developed consequences? Is that what you're saying, Rabbi?
Develop consequences.
I think
no
that's
sense in holding people accountable. Holding people accountable if you don't have any consequences.
I think that also developing a consistent more than once a month opportunity for us to have a conversation, even if it's via Zoom, so that we can know what our right hand know what the left hand is doing, even if the right hand doesn't agree, but at least we know what's going on.
Mhm. Well, my thing is that we have to have, I think, the top 10 things that what we want to see from our elected officials. And as far as this money locally, what we want them to do with it, the top 10 things. And number one would be education for the children. And then, everything else falls down the line, the top 10, I don't care about the mold, I want it I care about getting into my house so I can clear the mold myself. So that's one of the things, and we have to agree on those top 10 things as far as the solution is concerned, to present them to our elected officials. And then as far as our elected officials, if they're not progressive enough, then we don't support those people, no matter who
Wasn't a
gives us
party
the,
affiliate.
not like,
Absolutely.
no matter who gives us the direct deposit, and those who cut side deals, like Bishop Minor was saying, then we hold those people accountable for cutting side deals by pushing one of these wannabe candidates, to the front door. So, what are you doing? So that's the main thing. That's the main solution.
Awesome.
Another is identifying the streams, all right? Streams of money, if you will. Identifying the budgets.
Right.
For instance, the education system is not funded by money from Cleveland. It's funded by money from the county and the tax assessments. So you need to identify your streams and set priorities for those streams.
All right. I'm agreeing with it. I love it. One of the things that I want to say is we have to learn how to support alternative media outlets, because our media doesn't always tell our story the way that it
Thank
needs to
you.
be told. And support doesn't mean like giving Larry, Mariah, WOVU a pat on the back and an attaboy. Support means support them financially, like we support the other because without those alternative media outlets, our stories don't get told, and somebody else tells our narrative. And media is the reason why we have a First Amendment, is because media is supposed to protect us from our elected officials and from our nonprofits and community leaders. If we don't tell the story, and if we don't have a mechanism to be able to tell that story, we have no protection, zero protection. What happens to Ahmaud Arbery if that video doesn't make it to media?
Mm-hmm.
The killers go free and they don't spend life in jail. That's what happens.
Right.
The same thing that happens with the cop that George Floyd. He doesn't do a day in jail. A day.
Player T in the Hood, Larry Garner, Mariah Crenshaw, the entire staff at WOVU. Those are alternative media outlets that are unbought and unbossed. And whether you like them or hate them, Eric Brewer, who's one of our brilliant writers that curses all the time, but he's still one of our brilliant writers. The bottom line is we have to support them, because without their support, without them, their ability to write and to cover, where's our protection? What are we going to depend on them to protect us?
Jerry, correction, Eric doesn't curse, he speaks in French.
That's what he says. Yeah, I'm going to agree to that in some shape or form, because he does send me his articles all the time. And I'll put in my Cash App information just for everybody to know, plus my telephone number if anybody wants to call me in the chat. Right. I am here at home, so I am resting. So yeah, it is very important. Support those alternative media stuff. It's like,
the Real Deal Press with Richard Andrews, whether you like him or hate him, but the fact of the matter is he will write it. Kathy Ray Coleman, all of them.
Right. And we just tell the truth, even though people call us half crazy. So I'm just going to be.
I'm okay with it. I like it.
Larry, it doesn't make me any difference, because your opinion of me is none of my business.
Actually
All
like
right,
you.
so let's get back to the solution. Anybody else have any other solutions?
I think as we move along, I don't think anybody's idea should be discarded.
Absolutely.
We should prioritize, all right, and move through that agenda.
Yes, sir.
As we see fit according to priorities.
I think that okay, you're about to write prioritize all of these solutions is what you're saying, Rabbi?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
All right, and then also I think that we should bring all of, from Dr. Claude Anderson, from Dr. Boyce Watkins, the Black agenda that Ice Cube put out, bring all of them together, share that information, and then let's take what we feel is the best and applicable for us in our local markets, wherever they are.
Mm-hmm. I think down on the list, but we must take in consideration develop visible credibility and a budget and visible credibility. And what I mean by that, a budget and then a place to meet, where we have office and we begin to have management of our priorities.
Okay. It's good stuff. I think for me, being definitive of what's in the best interest of our community first and prioritizing that over party affiliation. Another one is not being afraid to have conversations with people who are not traditionally people that we would talk to everybody and hold everybody accountable. Not being afraid to have conversations with people about their budgets, where the money's going.
And where's it coming from?
And where is it coming from? Yes, sir.
Speaking of money, and we're watching the NFL right now. The NFL draft was here. Didn't they bring like $142 million to the city? Is that money already spent?
But of course.
Damn. Okay.
Was you about to ask, how much did you get?
Nothing. I ain't getting nothing. I already know what I got.
How much did I get? How much the people who look like you got?
Right. Like where's the like the thing about it is, and most of our community was down at the NFL draft. Spending money.
Well, Larry, better yet, the NBA also
is on his way.
Is on his way, yeah.
Are we going to get in line to make sure that a fair share of that comes to our community?
Hey, absolutely. And we have a brand new county administration about to come in. Are we going to get a fair share of that $400 million a year that comes from our community back to our community? But let's stay with solutions because we can be on a tangent. Does anybody else have any? Councilman Neal, do you have any? Kareem, do you have any solutions that you wanted to mention? Let's see.
No, I disagree. Understanding the budgets, understanding with all this discussion about equity, what that actually looks like in procurement opportunities, and of course these American Rescue Plan dollars that have come into not just the city but the school system and the county.
Hey, and let me say this. Finding a way to cover and protect people who are bold enough to stand up and say right is right and wrong is wrong. I had somebody that I had a conversation with a couple weeks ago who said to me, Jerry, I'm tired of being punished for doing the right thing. And we should not have to feel that way, period, because we see something that's wrong. It's wrong that 99% of the county spend goes to somebody else's community when we represent 30% of this county. That's wrong. And when somebody stands up and says it, we have to be able to say they're right, let us help them. Or when somebody like Councilman Neal stands on the floor and says, hey, look, what y'all doing with that money that those hundreds of millions of dollars that you got from the opioid settlement? What did you do with our people? How much of it did you spend? And that's 120 million just in Cuyahoga County. That doesn't even include Summit County or Hamilton County or any of the other counties. So somebody has to, when those people like Councilman Neal stand up and say that, he ain't crazy. And we need to make sure that we cover him and let everybody know that we are here to protect him. And if you move on him, you're moving on us. I think we have to be more inclusive with our community and let everybody have their say. Sometimes we'll have somebody who 4 years ago said something crazy and we don't want to listen to them today and we don't want to give them credence. But things change, people mature. Listen to everybody's voice. Doesn't mean that we have to do what they say, but we have to listen to their voice. Advocate for our an equitable spend with our minority nonprofits, minority-run nonprofits. They're starved. I've literally been in the room with executive directors, and not just one, of minority nonprofits, and watched them try to figure out they have to rob Peter to pay Paul. And there has to be a way. We have to, on that one, we have to demand everybody that comes before us, we have to demand that they find a better way to deal with their reimbursements.
Jerry, also farther down the line, to develop the framework to call the community together to develop a strategic plan or a Black agenda.
Yes, sir. I think that also as young people, Mr. Hairston and Rabbi and even Dr. Miner, for me, I've had times where they've called me, pulled me to the side and had to, let's just say, correct me. I don't always agree with it, but as young people, we have to accept some correction from our elders, that we don't have to do everything that they say, because Lord knows I don't. But
you got that right.
Right. But we have to accept the fact that, Rabbi he'll be 83 years old at the end of this month. And he didn't get to be 83 by making too many mistakes, if that makes any sense to you. And then I think that as it relates to party affiliation, we have to put our ethnicity over party affiliation. And I'm not talking about R, I'm not talking about D or independent, I'm talking about just period. I'm not talking about progressive or just the normal track of a Democrat. I'm talking about just period, and not be afraid to have those conversations. Anybody else got anything? I feel like I'm talking all day.
I just wanted to say this, if this is, and I think it was mentioned a bit earlier, but if this is to stay pure, we have to ensure that people that, and we'll know who they are, but people that just have compromising kinds of positions with regards to politics, like holding office in the party, working for someone who's holding office or actually holding office themselves. For them to be able to hold positions within the party just means they're an operative, or they can be an operative. And we have to protect ourselves from against that.
So you're saying protect ourselves, acknowledge who an operative is, or a gatekeeper, if you will, and protect ourselves from them. Okay.
Yeah. We gotta, I'll say this, that, you know, I mean, because we see some of it now where we see the people who, like, if like I was on the executive committee at one time for the Cuyahoga County Democratic Party, and to see people who hold elected office, but also, you know, they're the head of, you know, like, you know, the precinct committee, or their
Ward leader, your councilman and ward leader. Say it like it.
Councilman and ward leader, stuff like that.
Or mayor and ward leader.
I was going to say, I was about to say that. I've seen it with men. And so when you see that kind of stuff, that's like too much influence with someone wearing multiple hats. Those kinds of people that hold those kinds of positions do not need to be being a part of this group and helping with decision making, because those are going to be the folks that's why they're on that precinct committee spot. That's why they're in that ward leader spot, for that very reason, so they can influence. And so we can't let a larger group be controlled by folks like that, because that's giving them a bigger platform than just their respective wards.
And you know, on that point, Jerry, I think there is also room for a personal acknowledgement, right? So in King's strategy for civil disobedience, when they employed a 7-process strategy, one of them was information, reconciliation. Now watch this. The third or fourth, depending upon how you teach it, third or fourth principle was called purification, right?
Self-purification.
Right, and that's where a person steps back. Say we're doing an action, they're part of the team, but say we're doing an action or we have a target. The issue of self-purification is where a person steps back and say, okay, on this one, I need to step back because I have a contract with the county, or I have this role, or I have a particular situation in my life that would cause me to have a conflict of interest, or maybe put me in a compromising situation. And so when you talk about the praxis of how we carry this out, these are the kind of principles that people embrace, where they're honest about their situation. So whatever agendas that are out there, I don't have to call you on it. You'll call me. I mean,
you call yourself.
I'll call you, you know, and I'll say, look, because there was a period in which I was in a compromising role when it came to Mayor Frank Jackson, because of my wife had a position. It wasn't anything I hid from, wasn't anything that I put on the side. It was very evident for me and very clear that there were issues that normally I would have been out front on, but I wasn't, because it was a conflict of interest. That's the kind of honesty, integrity that we have to have in this process. And I think we can borrow those kinds of value-based principles, like how King attempted with his group, for us to have that purification process.
Absolutely. And to that note, Andrew, if we could put on there, I think that we ought to, and Dr. King outlined that in a letter from Birmingham jail. Maybe we can push that out to everybody who, I'll push it out on after this Zoom meeting, but we can push this out to everybody who's a participant, because it's an awesome strategy. How about if somebody picks up the phone and calls you for correction, listen to them. There might be some truth in what they have to say. Don't just automatically say, I ain't listen to Rabbi. Rabbi always taking a shot at me.
You're a target, so why shouldn't I?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Yes, sir.
I think Jerry, as we're talking, and you touched on something there, and then a few minutes ago, in terms, there is knowledge, all right, and then there is wisdom, and wisdom basically is, without being theological, wisdom is knowing how and when to use knowledge. And I think when we come together with the old folks in the group, I'm not one of them. I think my thinking is much younger than my age. Not that I'm immature, but I think progressively, and I don't stay stuck in the past. But when we have been somewhere and experienced some things, and we can share with you how to better use some of the tools and the knowledge that you have.
Absolutely.
And it's not that we want to run things, but we how can we be more effective and not waste unnecessary knowledge and energy, if it makes sense. Not that we want to run things, but
absolutely. I agree. I agree. Did anybody else have anything else that they wanted to touch on? All right, so inside on my Facebook page and inside of this link, I sent a link out for anybody who wants to participate on this coming Thursday at 6:00 p.m. on Zoom. It will not hit Facebook because we're going to go in and have a working session, a hackathon, if you will. If you want to participate in that, click the link, send me your name, your phone number, your email address, and I'll send you all the materials. Was there anybody else who had anything else to say? First of all, I want to say thank you to everybody who did participate on the Zoom link, and everybody who took the opportunity to comment and or participate via Facebook. We will download and have this YouTube link, this session on YouTube today, and it'll be on my Facebook page and in the solutions, the solution group on Facebook. And I just really want to say thank you to everybody who participated. Let's get in some good trouble. With that being said, Dr. Minor, do you mind closing us out in prayer?
Right. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we pray for prophetic integrity. We pray for community conscious. We pray, Lord, for honest dialogue. But more than that, may this not be just a moment, but may it truly turn into a movement. And we pray, Lord, that if there is anything that is confusing or anything we disagree with, Lord, may we turn to each other and not on each other. And may we stay committed to the prize. And the prize is simply this, that we all come together for the betterment of our people. Bless us, give us strength and vision. May we all stay safe in the midst of this time of COVID, in the midst of this pandemic. And may we all be blessed by the God that we serve and the spiritual practice that we are committed to. This is our prayer as we all say amen.
Amen.
Shalom.
All right. Thank you all. Have a great one.
Amen.
Great.
All right, sir, brother,
session.
correct seeing you, man.
All right,
Bless
good.
this brother.
All
Bye.
right.